moving on. Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and part number 3 of the Revell 148 scale F-15C Eagle. Alright, quick recap. In part 2, I basically got step 1 completed in its entirety, which is unusual for an aircraft kit for me. But I got the cockpit all put together, got the landing gear in place, painted and in place, and then I did these two small parts here and the painting on the inside of the fuselage. So there's where it stands. I even got the figure painted and installed as well. So ready to move on to step 2, where we start putting fuselage halves together. Alright, so as you can see here, the cockpit subassembly goes into the right side in relation to the pilot. The right side, or I guess that would be the starboard side in naval terminology, of the fuselage, and then close the other part on top of that. So that is what I'm going to do. First, I had one of my esteemed colleagues and friends, Jim Deck, ask why I put this in now instead of later, which was my original plan. But the reason being is when this is in place and everything is glued together, because of this long extension here and the way this part right here slides down into the back of the gear bay, there's like a couple of guides inside of there that this slips behind, so there's no wiggle room, so it wouldn't have fit. So I had to do it this way, and all I'll do is I'll just tape all this off whenever I do the rest of the airbrushing, so no big deal really. But as you can see here, this is how this fits in here, and it fits really well actually so far. So I think what I will do is I will glue that side in and then glue this part on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to, using my scalpel here, Lloyd Morant, if you're watching, thanks. Because of the curve, it's a little easier to scrape some of this paint off, so we get a good plastic to plastic bond. It's not really necessary because the glue will dissolve this, but I look at it just like welding metal. I want to have nice clean bare metal to weld, so I like nice clean bare plastic to bond with model cement. Get that scraped off. Now what I've done is I've got all that ready to go, and I've already test fit this on here. It's just easier to do it off camera, but it all fits just fine. I'm going to need to clamp it some, but it's okay, top and bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this part on here, and the way I'm going to do that is with some Tamiya extra thin, and glue it there, and behind the instrument panel there. Hold that in place for a couple of seconds there and make sure it sticks. Alright, so now I'm ready to start gluing this. And the way I like gluing fuselage parts is doing a segment at a time. So from natural break to natural break. So like from here to here, here to here, here to here, and then here to here. That way I can control where each individual part is going. Now, something else I'm going to do, and I've been wanting to try this for a while, but I'm going to use my good old-fashioned, I used to use this stuff exclusively back in the day, but I've been wanting to try it just mainly for stuff like seams. And I think it might help with ghost seams, but I'm not sure. So anyway, I am going to use the good old Tester's liquid cement. Again, I've used it for years. Now I will not be using the supplied applicator, it's just too coarse. So I have a special brush marked cement for just such things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply it from the inside. Probably can't see it because it's kind of dark down in there. So with that, then I'm going to check and make sure that it's lined up as possible, you know, no step, okay, or minimize the step. Now there is some detail on here. Now, I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but let me put this lid on before I tip it over. It is a panel of some type. So what I plan to do for stuff like that is I will just scribe that out with a template, because I'm going to probably end up losing it when I sand all this. But that's the plan anyway. So we'll let that set up. So I'm going to get a piece of tape here. So while that is setting up, I'm going to use a piece of tape. This is just regular green painter's tape. I could have used my Tamiya tape, but this stuff is more plentiful and cheaper. So I figure, why not use that? All right, so that should be good there. So now I can move on to this part here. I'm going to do the same thing. Now for these parts that I can't really, well, I should be able to reach all that on the inside. One thing to note is sometimes I use these largish clamps for doing this, and that's for like if there's a part that maybe it lines up nicely on the bottom, but the top may be cockeyed a little bit, I can use this to kind of apply pressure in a specific direction. So like the bottom fits together good and maybe the top is overlapped a little bit or a little higher, I can use the clamp crosswise to pull it even, so that way there's minimal seam stuff to mess with. But oddly enough, even on this old mold kit, I don't seem to have that problem yet, so we will see if it crops up later. Okay, so let's get this cement again. Whoa, jeez. See, that's what I hate about that flipping little stem in there. There. No longer a problem. Remove it. Okay, so again, doing it on the inside like this. Another piece of tape. So another nice thing about applying it from the inside like that is there's no residual glue on the top to bleed through, and you definitely don't want to put your tape on and then glue it, because that could cause some problems with bleed, capillary action, whatever you call it. Now, this little vent thing right here, it is not aligned very well. One side, like the panel line, lines up there, and it's pretty flush there and there. But this is kind of off, so I don't really see any way I can fix that other than just kind of, probably just end up leaving it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, there's that part glued there. So now I can move on to this part down here once that sets up. So I'm going to let it set up for a second or 10. All right, next part, we'll do this back here. Again, same thing. This one is kind of high here, and high here. So how am I going to do that? Let's see. Yeah, I think that'll work. That'll make it a little high right here, but that I can sand down. So what I'll do is I'll run glue in the whole thing. This part seems to be staying on its own, and then I'll just clamp this in here. So pop the top off the lid and watch how it's not going to go flying, because I took that thing out, the little dumb brush, and use my dedicated cement brush here again. You probably can't see what's going on. Let's see if I can show you from the inside like that. Yes, I am slathering it on because I want it to kind of melt up good. So we got that. So let's take a piece of tape, tape it across like that. That's actually not bad. So I'm going to tape it across and then clamp it like that. And that should hold that good. Oh yeah. All right, that looks pretty good. So now all I got to do is let that set for a second, and then we'll move on to this part up here. All right, so let's do this one now. Now this one looks like it's lining up pretty good all the way. So that one I shouldn't have to do anything with any clamps. I'll have to tape it, but that's about it. So same thing. Like that. Couple pieces of tape. All right, so that should be good. So we'll come back once this cures up really well and take care of sanding all this stuff and getting it evened out nicely. So let's set that aside. And now that finishes off these parts of step 2. So now we're ready to move on to these parts here. So I need part 2, which is this ginormous piece here. And like I do on all my videos, I will show how I cut off and clean first couple of parts, then the rest I'll do off camera to save time. So we got, oh man, I'm trying to cut this as flat as possible, so there we go. All right, so we got that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off as close as I can without marring the edge, like this. And for this I'm using my Tamiya Super Whammy Extra Spectacular cutter. Alright, so there's that. So we got that part cut. Now we also need part number 63. All right, due to editing error, we missed this part. So this is the Gatling gun, which is part number 63. So what I did with this is, let's zoom in. As you can see, I drilled out the ends of the barrels, and the way I did that, because it was just, I don't know if you can, well, let's look at this for example. Well, you know what, let me demonstrate on the back of this the shaft here. What I do to do machine gun barrels is I will take my X-Acto knife and place the tip as close to the center as possible, and then twirl it around to start kind of a pilot hole, because I'm not very good at doing it with just the a drill bit. So I get a pilot hole started as close to center as possible. Then I take a Micro Mark Small Tool Specialist 10-piece carbide drill bit set, metric. And in this case, for the actual barrels, I used a 0.6. But for this, since this is a little bit larger and it'll show up a little better on camera, I'm using a 0.8 millimeter. And I just start it like that. Now that one's pretty centered. Now if it were off center a little bit, I would go in at a little bit of an angle and then straighten it up. And what that does is it kind of pushes the bore of the barrel in the direction that you want. Okay, don't have to go very far, so then you end up like that. Now if there's a little bit of burring around the muzzle, you can take some Tamiya Extra Thin and just smooth it out like that. And voila, you have a drilled out barrel. So that's what I did on all that right there. And that part goes right here. It just fits right, whoops, right there. So what I'm going to do before I glue this part in is I need to paint this, and I need to paint the inside of this opening here where the muzzle of the gun is. So to do that, I'm going to use my handy dandy rubber black from AK 3rd generation acrylics, and I'll just put a little bit of that in my Now again, I'm just going to demonstrate this, the way I do the paint stuff for the first time, and then the rest of the painting, unless it's something kind of, you know, extra special that needs illustration, I will do that off camera to save time. So I've got my palette here. I've got my number 4. It's a pretty large brush. That may be a little bit large. Let's try a smaller one. No, that'll be okay, because I'm going to thin that out a little bit with some distilled water, which any water will do. I just prefer distilled. Thin it out. And then I'm just going to paint it on the inside here, because I just want it to be dark. Some of that edge will be covered up with exterior paint, but this way it's not just bare plastic. All right, so we got that, so that's ready. And for the gun barrel itself, I'm going to use Vallejo acrylic metal color, airbrush colors, steel. And that is quite simple. Basically only need to do this part here. Like that. Then we can glue that into place. So we'll put that there. And then use Tamiya extra thin and touch it there and there. Make sure it's pressed firmly into place, and that looks pretty cool. Next we need 2 parts 61 and 62, and those are to be painted J, which is white. So that's here and here. It's funny, the sprue gates on these things, on these older kits, are sure a lot different than the modern kits. Alright, so this doesn't really have to be cleaned up that well because it's going to be up inside the fuselage and invisible. But I want to make sure that it's trimmed off and make sure that it fits right. Alright, so I need to, I got parts 61 and 62 cut off, and what these are the interior of the landing gear bays, the rear landing gear. So what I need to do here, first of all, is you can probably see that there is a ejector pin mark there. So what I'm doing to get rid of those, not that they're really going to be visible, but they might be a little bit visible. So I just want to make sure that it's cleaned up fairly well. So I'm using this chisel type blade, X-Acto blade. I'm not even going to bother putting it in a handle, but basically I'm just, it'd probably be easier if I did put it in a handle, but I'm just using it like this, because this particular ejector pin mark protrudes from the surface around it. So I want to get all that off. Then, using this handy dandy 1200 sanding stick here, I'm just gonna sand it down to where it looks like that. All right, so that takes care of that. Next, I think we got a little bit of on this edge right here is a bit of flash or mold seam line, whatever you want to call it. It's not as pronounced on this one, but it is on this one. So I'm going to carefully scrape that down to where it is not protruding anymore. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. Got that cleaned up a little bit there. And then for this edge, since it's nice and flat, I think I will sand it. Again, I'm using a 1200. Probably a little bit fine, but for some crazy reason, these sanding sticks make a big jump in grit. It goes from 320 to 1200. So I don't know if I missed a set somewhere or what, but it's all right. Whoops, that's too coarse. Same thing. Make sure that's sanded somewhat smooth. Get that edge right there. I don't want any weird looking, because especially under paint and especially under gloss paint, that will be visible if there's like a bit of an edge or lip to it. So I want to make sure that it's nice and uniform. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. So next thing I need to do is I need to paint the inside of these. Now again, I don't do airbrushing. Very rarely do I do it on camera just because it is boring. It takes forever. And there's plenty of videos on how to airbrush. Of course, there's plenty of videos on how to build models, but anyway, I'll do this off camera and then come back. All right, so I've got the inside of this primed and painted with gloss white. These parts gloss white as well. These are the landing gear doors. I went ahead and cut those off and painted them now. I don't need them till later, but since I already had the white paint out, I went ahead and did it. Same with the landing gear. So with that, I'm ready to move on a little bit. So I got that in, got those painted and ready to go. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check some of the flash on this. There's some flash going on in different spots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off part number 1 so I can kind of put it together, test fit it, and see what it looks like and where I need to clean stuff up. So let me get that cut off and I'll come back. All right, and looking at this stuff, the parts seem to fit okay. So I'm not really gonna have to do any cleanup until after I get all this together. So what I'm gonna do here, because there's going to be some sanding and stuff right there and right there, right there, right there, and along these inside edges here especially, but it won't be too bad. And I'm going to lose some of this raised panel line detail, but you know what, I'm really not all that concerned with it. So the next thing I need to do is, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this together. And one of the things that I've heard is kind of a bummer is the fit of this to this part here. So let's take a look at that and see what we got going. Okay, so it looks like this is a bit too pinched to match up with this. So let's try and put the bottom part in first. See what I mean? But it shouldn't be that hard to I can tape this, but I ain't gonna mess with it right now. But that goes there, and that one goes there like that. Okay, so that's the way it's supposed to be. Now, it's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be, because I've heard horror stories. So yeah, that's not too bad. That is definitely workable. So what I'm going to have to do is, I think, in order to, I think if I glue all this stuff together first, then I can worry about this, because even if I have to shim it, it shouldn't be that hard. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this right here is really flat. So I'm going to have to do some sanding. So let me show you how I'm going to do that before I go any further. So what I'm going to do is I got this piece of sandpaper. This is 320 grit. That's the coarsest I have, but it will work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and it's kind of nice that these protrusions right here really gives me something to grip on, because I want to keep it really flat. Set it flat. And just sand it like that to get it really smooth. Really, I want a really flat surface there. All right, so I'm going to work on that a little bit just like that, and then I'll come back. Okay, that's sanded pretty stinking flat. Now there's a little bit of a gap right there, but I'll fill that in when I fill in the rest. So that should be good. Seems to be glued really well. But before I glue that on, obviously I'm going to sand everything down. But in the meantime, I can continue on with these parts here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to glue these parts 61 and 62 into the lower fuselage part here. So those are over here. The way these work is they fit one way, and sorry, had that backwards. There we go. All right, so that one goes there, and there's a couple of pins here that help guide them. So it goes right there like that. And let's see, I should be good. You know what? I'm going to use this glue again. I like this stuff. I'm renewing my interest in this cement. Alright, so let me press that in place. I'll do the same thing with this one here. Okay, those parts are glued. Now it's time to put this and this together. So this is going to be kind of tough to do on camera, I think. So I may have to do it off camera. However, I will attempt it. So we got the same thing going on here. I'm going to do it in sections and try and keep it lined up. So I'm going to start here. So there's some pins. So Okay, because of the size of this part, I'm gonna have to be careful not go off out of frame. So I've got this glued here and here, and what I'm gonna have to do, I've got the back of it clamped to hold it in place. It's not glued yet, just to keep it from flopping around, because I'm gonna have to do this in a segmented kind of way, because of the size of these parts. So putting some glue on there, I'm gonna have to tape it. Just to hold it together. As I work my way around, and this is definitely going to take some work as far as scraping and sanding, and I'm going to lose some of that raised detail panel lines, but you know what, I'm not going to sweat it because it's so faint. Probably won't even notice it. This project is more about the paint and the decals than anything else. Again, I'm going for a tabletop kind of thing. I'm not making a kit that people need to be looking at up close. Is that a cop out? No, that's just my plan for it. And all these uneven surfaces make it hard to clamp. Okay, so there's that part. There's going to be a lot of sanding and stuff going on this one. See this part right here? See, this inside edge is touching, but this outside part isn't, so there's going to be some filling going on there. So I'm just going to work my way around the edge. All right, so one side is done, so now I'm going to start working on this other side. Now this side fits a lot better than the other one did. Alright, so I've got everything all glued up here, so now the fun begins. I need to start grinding down some stuff. So I think I'm going to be doing this off camera because it's going to take a while, because I need to get that ridge gone. Got to get all that smoothed out. So basically I'm going to use a sander for the really heavy stuff. And this is a 320. See how hideous that sounds? But I need to start sanding all it down. So I'm going to start working on that. And once I get it to a point I'm stoked with, I'll come back. So while all of the filling and glue and all that stuff is how do you say, curing up, I need to remove this right here. which is the copyright information and manufacturer stuff. So using this chisel thing again, you know what? I'm gonna use my handle. It's kind of rough on the phalanges. So I'm just gonna scrape it all off like this. And then finish it up with a sanding stick. This is a 400 here. And there you go. All gone. So another thing I need to do is, I don't know if you can see, but we got a little bit of a step here and here from the molding process. So I need to get all that taken care of. It's on this side as well. It's like whenever the molds were put together, they were slid a little bit. So got some of that to do. So I think for that, to take off a decent amount of material, I'm going to use this 320 just to knock the majority of it off. This will be stuff I need to really check carefully once I start priming to make sure that I got it smoothed out properly. So I'm just going to go all the way around both of these. Okay, so right here, there was a big overlap. You can kind of see how much it overlapped right there. So what I did is I kind of filled that in with some of my sprue goo. I also did it on this side here. This side was met like it should, kind of like this. However, this one here was like that. So now the next thing I'm going to do was using this 320 grit sanding stick. I'm probably not going to be able to do this on camera much because I need to get it up and away, and it'd just be weird angle in there. But basically I just need to sand this off and contour with the angle of this part here. So it shouldn't be too bad. Matter of fact, it's looking pretty good already. So that looks pretty good. So now I just need to smooth that out a bit with, let's start with a 400. So I'm going to work with a 400, then I'll do a 6, then I'll do an 8 to hopefully smooth it out. So there we go. Looks pretty good. Need to clean this up a bit here. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing on this other side here. This shouldn't take near the work because this one's pretty well lined up. Alright, with those being all sanded up, that takes care of step number 2. So now, step 3. Okay, so step 3 starts with the exhausts. And something interesting, it's got both these parts labeled as 65. Yet on the sprue, they're 65 and 64. No big deal, because I mean, you can easily tell what they are. It's just kind of funny that they've got them mislabeled like that. So since I've demonstrated cutting and cleaning, I'm going to do this part off camera, and then we'll come back and assemble them. Okay, so I got all those parts cut off and cleaned up, and that was kind of a chore because there's a lot of little weird bits and pieces that need to be cut and scraped. But basically the way it goes together is like this. But I'm going to paint it before I do that. But even before I do that, I need to make sure that this stuff's going to fit in here properly. So right now, I've already worked on it a little bit, but these have to fit here. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap there. See, on one side, it fits pretty good. Like this right here, that fits really nice and flush. So with that nice and flush, there's a gap there. And it looks like it is because this part right here, the molding on it, it's kind of curved in a little bit, it looks like. Now this side isn't quite as bad, but it's still got a bit of a gap. So I need to work on this a little bit in order to get it to fit properly. Now I got a couple of different options that I can do. I'm not going to try and fill it with putty because that's too big of a gap, and there is some detail there, but I need to figure out something. So I'm thinking I'm going to take down some material here and here to get it to where it will sit more fleshly. But see, still even that, I'm not sure that's going to work, because with it sitting flush on this side here like that, I've got a gap here all the way across. So the only way I could really get it to be nice and flush is I'd have to sand all of this, and I may try and do that. So I'm going to work on that for a little bit, at least one side, see what happens, and then I'll show you what I think I'm going to do. Okay, so here's what I did. I just sanded on this edge here and this edge here and made sure it was really flat. And now, as you can see, it fits with no seam. So all I got to do is do the same on this side. And just to kind of show you, I just use the sander, sanding the edges, use my knife very carefully, trimming off more where high points were, and then sanding them smooth, and just kept doing that until I got this. So that is going to work nicely. All right, so the other side is done as well. So that is, I'm really stoked with that. Really nice and flush. So that'll look good. All right, now with all of those around with the exhaust parts done, next part is to cut off parts 15R and 15L, which are here, and they're nicely marked right on the part, so I won't have a problem getting them mixed up. All right, so I'm going to try and demonstrate how these go together, but because of the size of this, it may get all out of whack. But 15R goes on this side here. And the way it works is you're supposed to put this, well, first let me show you, let's see. Don't know if you can see, but down inside of there is like a little lip, and then right here there's an edge. So the way it's supposed to work is you put this inside here like this, make sure it's sitting flat on this section going inside, and then you just slide it forward to where that's butted up there, and this part here is in front. Hopefully you can see it, of that little lip. So hopefully that makes sense. But that's the way it goes. And it actually fits pretty decently. So I'm gonna get my glue out. And glue that thing in there. So let's see, let's I'm gonna have to do this off camera here because I gotta be able to get the parts in there like that. Alright, so that's pretty good. So just need to do the same on the other side. Okay, with those glued in place, the next thing I need to do is cut out these two parts, number 11. And apparently those are both exactly the same. So, yep, they're, oh no, one's labeled 11 and the other one's 12. So the 11 goes on this side here. So let me get those cut off. All right, so these parts, they fit in here like this. This part fits up against this part here, and then this top edge goes right here. Now there's a big ejector pin mark right there, but that is going to be totally covered by the what you call the fuselage. So I'm not going to bother trying to cover that up or trying to take care of that. So I'm going to have to figure out how to get this part to fit in here. There we go. So it goes like that, and then that fits right there like that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this lower part here, hopefully. Get out this tester cement. I'm going to glue the lower part first and let that set up really well, and then I'll worry about this part because I'm going to have to clamp that. Just as a side note, I'm really digging this cement. Like I've said before, I haven't used it in a really long time, but it really is good cement. Is it as good as, to me, extra thin? I don't know, but it's working really well. And any of the places where I've glued stuff together, there hasn't been any ghost seams. So that's always a good thing. Okay, I'm going to put some cement in here as well. So I want all that to stick really well whenever I have to clamp this. So I'm going to let this set up for a minute, and then I'm going to glue the other side the same way, and then we'll come back and talk about the front part. Okay, so a bit has happened since that last segment there. And excuse the voice, I've got something weird going on with my throat. But anyway, sorry. So on this part here, where this goes in here, so I got all these glued in here, got them sanded down a little bit. Now where this part goes in here, there were two tabs. I ended up cutting the bottom one off, and I put a spacer, just a toothpick / cocktail stick, whatever you want to call it, in there to spread that to the appropriate width here. Then, because there was a gap on the bottom, I used a bit of styrene sheet and made a shim. So everything fits together pretty well. By pushing a little bit from the bottom, I get pretty good alignment. Now I'm gonna have to do some. I'm gonna have to put like a bead of my sprue goo on there, feather that all together. Same on the bottom, and then that will take care of that part of the fuselage. So it's actually worked out pretty well. I've already started sanding some seams off. I had to put some sprue glue in here because there was like a divot where the parts came together, like a mold defect, sink mark actually. So I filled those in, so I need to let those cure up a bit before I can sand them. So I'm kind of at a standstill, so I'm gonna stop here, pause, and then, you know, when I come back, I'm not ending the video here, but I just need to let some of this stuff dry up, and then when I come back, I'll glue this part on here, start working that in really good, then we can move on to the wings. So back in a few.